Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher. In his video, The Redestruction of TMM, Deflating Atheism posed a rhetorical question.
Your reasoning is so bad! Why do atheists always fail so badly at logic? It's like some mental block preventing them from making logically valid arguments.
Which I'm going to answer just for fun. The reason why atheists can't logic, as it were, is that, it's not a general thing, because there are some who can. But the thing you have to remember is that Deflating Atheism is talking primarily with atheists on the internet, and not just atheists on the internet, but specifically the ones who go out of their way to seek out believers. You might loosely call this, if an evangelical person is someone who's trying to spread the good news, from the Greek kaka, meaning bad, you could have kakangelical atheists, that is to say, atheists who want to spread the bad news, who want to announce the death of God. I understand many atheists are simply trying to announce that they don't believe in God. As if people care what they believe in. Anyway, but they do this in exactly the same manner as those who are trying to announce the death of God, 100 years ago when people's spines worked better. So these are people who are doing something fairly unusual, and moreover, and this is the very important part, they're volunteers. Anytime you have volunteers, anytime you have people just doing things on their own initiative, you have self-selection biases. And so the thing to consider in this is what sort of self-selection biases are at play. Now, for any given activity, there will be a variety of motivations amongst the human populace as a whole. And people who are extremely motivated will overcome whatever hurdles, or almost whatever hurdles, are placed in their path and go and do it because they're just so motivated to do it. Most people, however, are not that motivated to do things. This applies all over the place, by the way. In other fields, you'll hear writers who talk about how, I have to write no matter what. I just have to write. And these are the people who will hold down 2 jobs just so they can write, or what have you, and so on. But that's actually quite uncommon. And, again here, having tremendous amounts of motivation is uncommon. So very often, a large chunk, often the bulk even, of people who are doing something are people for whom the hurdles just aren't that big. Now if you go on the complete other end, people who have no inclination to something whatever, even tiny hurdles will get in their way because they're just not inclined to it. But for people kind of in the middle, because, most things when you're talking about the population follows some sort of bell curve. So if there's the bell curve with super motivated people and super unmotivated people, what stands in the way of these people, and most people doing it. Now, one thing that stands in the way, specifically, of going and announcing the bad news would be, for example, understanding the connection between religion and morality. Now, I know that there are atheists who will tell you that if you just redefine morality, atheists are perfectly moral. They're the same people who will, however, there's that bus. I linked this in a previous video. I love this thing. There is a ad campaign on the side of buses saying, "There's almost certainly no hell, so stop worrying and go about living your life." But of course, atheism has no implications on morality. And indeed, if we're all just, nothing but collections of matter bumping around, with no such thing even as free will, just determined to do whatever we're determined to do by our initial conditions, morality doesn't even mean anything in that context. Now, granted, you also, in that context, believe that nothing you do can actually change the outcome of anything since you're not doing anything. But at the same time, it's the sort of thing that would give one pause when you realize that that people are subject to temptations, and one of the things that religion does is give you a reason to avoid giving into temptations. But if you don't know this, if you don't know how human beings operate, if you're unaware of the way that human beings are subject to temptations and need some sort of reason to not give in to temptations, if, say, you're one of those dimwits who thinks that people simply aren't tempted, and I love this, the people who believe in the herd instinct, the instinct to benefit our species, and so on, these are people who know no history, essentially no history. I'm sure they've, heard a few stray facts out of history, but, somehow they think that the 100 million people that communism, roughly 100 million people that communism killed in the last, 110 years. So, mostly the 19th century. I'm sorry, the 20th century, the 1900s. Somehow these are all entirely compatible. I'm sorry, they're not compatible with our instinct to benefit the species, but they're just not something you think about if you don't really know much of anything and aren't in the habit of thinking. And so it goes with lots of other subjects. If you don't understand things like how contingency works, if this is just a foreign concept to you, then things like the argument from contingency will bounce right off you, kind of like radio waves off of a tinfoil hat. Or more conventionally, rain off a duck's back. Anyway, the point being, if a person can't really understand what they read, if a person doesn't really understand logical argumentation, this makes it very, very easy for them to simply assume that anyone who disagrees with them is an idiot, and then to go yelling at these people who disagree with them because, well, they're idiots. So, if you look at this in terms of self-selection, why are there so many atheists who you'd barely even trust these people to tie their own shoes? They just seem so incredibly dumb. And to be clear, I mean, if you talk to them about entirely secular things like what are the laws of logic, and give them time to look it up, because, in a recent video, I actually blanked on one of them. I knew it, I just, blanked on it. But giving people time to look things up. What are the laws of logic? Do they invent non-existent laws of logic that aren't even logical? Things like that. That's a secular thing. Is the burden of proof a law of logic? No, it absolutely is not. This is not a religious versus atheist thing. This is just if you know something about logic versus if you know nothing whatever about logic. It also gets really, really bad. There's so many atheists who know nothing about science, or virtually nothing about science, to be slightly more precise, where you talk to them about purely scientific things, and not in the not to build any sort of God versus atheism point, but purely for no reason other than science. Simple concept that in order for evidence to confirm a theory, it has to fail to confirm competing theories. Otherwise, it just confirms all of them and doesn't help you to decide between these things. Therefore, say you're trying to decide between Einstein's theory of gravitation and Newton's theory of gravitation, and the not really Aristotelian, sort of what you might call fake Aristotelian, putatively Aristotelian, although, basically there's some people who misunderstood Aristotle, and said that Aristotle said that things fall because they like being near the ground. Whatever you want to call this theory, that is not a good representation, as I understand it, of Aristotle. Whatever you call that theory of gravitation, versus, say, like something Occam might have done, which is God makes all things move down, makes all things, within appropriate density, move down, and so on. So how do you decide between those theories? Now, whatever you think of these theories, and mind you, I don't subscribe to the William of Occam one. William of Occam probably would have been a heretic had he been, more popular, but there's just never any reason to say officially that he was wrong. Anyway, if you're deciding between these theories, dropping a hammer and watching it fall does no good. It cannot do any good. It confirms all four theories. Or really, it doesn't even do much of anything about all four theories. And where, say, William of Occam's theory, which would be entirely silent on the idea of how fast does something fall, any rate of falling whatever is entirely compatible with the theory. So it does not distinguish between them. Now, as I said, I don't believe in what would be William of Occam's theory. But at the same time, if you actually know what you are talking about, dropping a hammer and measuring how fast it falls. I didn't actually see that second part, by the way, when people presented it. They just said that if you don't believe in Newton's theory of gravity, it's sort of a hypothetical argument they didn't even realize was hypothetical. Then drop a hammer and see it rise, was their answer. And this is dumb to such an incredible degree precisely because it misses that in order to have something be disconfirming evidence, in order to, be confirming evidence of something, it has to be disconfirming evidence of competing theories. That's an entirely secular point that these dimwits just utterly missed, were completely and utterly oblivious to. And this being a Twitter back and forth with plenty of time in between, they had lots of time to think about their responses. They had lots of time to go look things up, even. So, this is dumb. This is, really what I mean is this is of low intelligence and poor education. And this sort of thing is actually surprisingly common amongst the atheists who will come out of the woodwork to go and yell at you about something or other that you've said. When you're a Christian on Twitter and YouTube and so on. It's a very, very common thing. It is, however, why are so many of them? It is, however, a self-selection bias very much at play. Because the people who know enough to understand a scientific theory, if you make some point about the theory of gravitation, somebody who actually understands this sort of thing is not going to come back with an idiotic, they actually stand a good chance of understanding whatever point it was you were making. Another problem that one finds is that people of low intelligence and poor education have a really, really hard time grasping that you are making some point which is not the main point they have at issue with you. So, for example, let's say you want to prove some sort of lemma. I'm using lemma from the mathematical thing because that's my background, is in math. But let's say you want to prove some point which you then intend to use, but that point is true. An intelligent, well-educated person, even who disagrees with your conclusion, will certainly grant your sub-point, your smaller point, because it is in fact true. They will also recognize that it is a smaller point and not the main thing at issue. If you're dealing with people with a lot of experience, they'll often say, I'm not willing to go with you, to this other step, but just to this step, yes, you're correct. That's the sort of thing that intelligent, well-educated people will do, and very often with very few words. You don't get whole arguments built over this. People don't make rebuttal videos to things which they actually recognize as being true. People don't come and put up rebuttal tweets about things which they actually know are true, because these things are a smaller point. Low intelligence, poorly educated people have a lot of trouble realizing you're making a different point. They kind of operate in this way like, if I agree with you about anything whatever, I have conceded everything between us and am now agreeing to be your mind slave, or something. They're never very clear on what this is. I haven't quite been able to figure it out. But this is roughly something that you do find with unintelligent, poorly educated people. They just don't deal well with anything like side points. They don't deal, so you can't build up to something because they will fight you every step of the way, even on things they should, in theory, be agreeing with you about. So again, and this is the thing, everything that is published, everything that is published is something that has been published, and therefore is something for which the barriers to publication have to have been overcome. Being unintelligent and poorly educated overcomes a lot of these barriers because you just don't know what's going on enough to know when to keep your mouth shut. There are lots of things, if I'm having an argument, or better yet, a conversation with an intelligent, well-educated atheist, there are lots of things he will say that I will not contradict because those specific points I recognize as specific points, and those are true. In the same way, that same person will keep silent about a lot of things that I say because he recognizes them as smaller points in which I am in fact correct. But you need a fair amount of intelligence and education. And I mean good education, not schooling, like education that actually teaches you things like thinking and logical argumentation and so on. That you need those things in order to be able to have those sorts of conversations. So the upshot is that conversations between two relatively intelligent, well-educated people tend to be a lot quieter and a lot less, they're much less entertaining if what you're looking for is something like verbal jousting or verbal dueling. I mean, people can trade wit, of course. Intelligent, well-educated people can agree to trade wit. but they think of it as something different. So you can do verbal jousting or verbal sparring, but that tends to be an activity of the young, because it's fun for a little bit, then you kind of get it out of your system every once in a great while. But the other thing is, you get older and develop social skills and have things like a sense of propriety, is that if you have a really great zinger, you tend to share that privately with somebody who you know will get the joke and who you know will understand it, in context and not as a general condemnation of somebody or so forth. So this is something you see as people get older. They tend to share jokes much more privately, much less publicly. Again, there are bigger hurdles to overcome, such as, is this something that will be generally understood? Is this something that will generally benefit the people who understand it? Is this something that won't cause too much harm to the people who don't understand it? All things that experience teaches you are questions to ask, and gives you an idea of what the answers actually are. The younger someone is, typically speaking, the more likely they are to assume that everyone will understand them, that it'll be of big benefit to those who do understand, and it'll cause almost no harm to those who don't. Experience tends to show you the contrary. Again, not universals, just tendencies. And so, when you put all of these self-selection things together, what you get is that people who don't know what they're talking about have a lot to say. People who do know what they're talking about have a lot less to say, precisely because they will easily recognize when other people already know it, and therefore it doesn't need to be said. Also because they're going to understand what other people mean, and so they're a lot less likely to think, like, that thing you said is stupid, because they misunderstood what it was. You can see this all over the place. Anytime you have people who need to publish frequently, the inability to understand what other people are saying can be immensely helpful. Somebody says something, and then you just jump on them as that thing being racist or blasphemous or, against free trade or for free trade or, whatever it is. In favor of slavery, in favor of communism, whatever extremes you want to go to. You'll find this for every thing along which there is a spectrum. There are not very intelligent people who will assume that every statement, conservatives who will assume that every statement is ragingly liberal unless it's ragingly conservative, and liberals who assume that every statement is ragingly conservative unless it's ragingly liberal. It really, really helps if you have deadlines and need to publish frequently. If people know about you only because you publish, that sort of thing really helps. It's also one reason why that goes along very well with people who are young, but it also goes along with people who just never learned very much and are starting older. It goes along with both of those things very well, because not knowing much means you don't have very much to say on subjects. So if you can massively oversimplify what other people are saying, it makes it much, much easier to have things to say about that and to respond to them. So that is a big part of the reason why it seems like this. And it really is the case. Like, speaking as a Christian and a fairly well-educated Christian, though there are people much, much better educated than I am, I'm appallingly underread in a wide variety of subjects, but nonetheless, I have, on the other hand, read a fair amount. I've read a lot more than nothing. It's really easy to come away from talking to people on Twitter and YouTube comments thinking that atheists are raving idiots. And it's a really good thing to remind ourselves that we're seeing a heavily self-selected group of people who are therefore not necessarily representative of anything but who self-selects themselves in this manner. So it's good to remind oneself of this for a whole variety of reasons. But in any event, I mean, that's the reason why I brought this up. That's the answer to the question that was an entirely rhetorical one on the part of Deflating Atheism. But it's a really, I think, important subject to remember. Because self-selection pressures are everywhere, and they are massively distorting of what we see. There is, incidentally, a very related topic, which is that people don't take evolution seriously enough. And I'm not going to get into that now. But I just want to pose this as sort of a question to think about. If these are the people who self-select, once these people have self-selected, and these are the people you have, Now, people who are going to do this are doing it in an environment in which these people already exist. Now, whether you're talking about academia or whether you're talking about YouTube or Twitter, one of the big ways that you get in yourself is by getting approval from people already there. It's not a strict requirement outside of academia. In academia, it is a requirement. Outside of academia, it is incredibly helpful if a popular YouTuber, interacts with you in some way, such that their giant fan base becomes aware of you. On Twitter, same thing for people with huge followers. In blogs, the same thing. So, while you could build something up completely from scratch, if someone notices you, it's a giant help. And therefore, the question to be asked is, who gets noticed? Pardon me. And it's people who get along to at least some degree who get noticed. And then you get, but then they're going to be different because they're responding to a different environment at that point. So there's a related but different set of self-selection criteria. In which case, now look at the third generation. Who is it who gets along with these people as well as the first generation? In academia, that looks along the lines of, who can get along with the other professors, and then who can get along with the people who got along with the other professors. Academia, this selection criteria is actually much more pronounced, and I think therefore the evolutionary pressures are even stronger, precisely because you need to get a PhD, you need to have these people appoint you to a position, or you're just not in academia. So it's something to think about, to ask this question of who are the people who fit well into this, who get liked by those sorts of people, and then carry this forward and carry it forward. Who are the sort of people who like them, who fit in with them, who get liked by them? Because these things all introduce selection criteria, and this will evolve the sort of people you actually see. Whether you're talking about academia, whether you're talking about YouTube and Twitter and so on, there are evolutionary pressures going on. There's evolution in action, not in a reproductive sense, but in a whenever you have selection pressures, those influence who gets selected, but that changes what the selective pressures are, and so you get something that is not the biological theory of evolution, but is very much an evolutionary process that works in basically the same way as selective pressures change the environment, introducing new selective pressures, in that sort of feedback loop. Very interesting thing to think about, because it actually explains an awful lot of what we see in human endeavors that have this sort of multi-generational approach and so on. So, leaving on that question, until next time, may you hit everything you aim at.